now I'd like to, move on the final segment of this public diplomacy. We can think about, what is the contending issues on public diplomacy. I think that this is the area that we can think about, more deep and substantive thinking and consideration on public diplomacy. I hope that you can focus and concentrate on those points as like a summary and also your understanding on public diplomacy. First issue is the image that I want versus the image the other perceives. You understand what this point is about? Almost all country would like to have or receive certain, of course, good and positive image, right, from foreign country and foreign people. But in reality, it's not working in that way, right? Many countries are facing a different perception from foreign people, right, around the world. So this is a mismatch. And also this is, first thing is like objective, right, goal. But second part is the reality, right? So question is how we can improve this mismatch as much as possible. I have to tell you at this moment on important point. Perception is important, right? Sometimes perception prevail and also it's much more important than facts, right? It's sometimes perception override facts, right? But do you think that facts will be, hiding, will be hidden and also forgot and manipulated, forever? I don't think so. The facts will prevail, eventually, right? And as time goes. So what is important thing is you cannot, hide your facts and also, beautify, certain negative thing, and which is not based on like just and right approach. So you are trying to like a propaganda type of thing, right? And it's not working in eventual way. So you have to keep in mind this very important point. So if you would like to have a positive image from other country, you have to rectify first the problem that you are facing, right? It could be democracy related thing, right? Political thing. It could be like a justice related thing, right? It could be human right related thing. It could be many value oriented thing. So what is the criteria? Criteria could be the Charter of the United Nations, right? And also Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All those undertakings that all member states, like now currently 193 countries are abiding by the Charter of the United Nations, right? So that is the so-called universal values, right? So each and every country can focus on this area. Basically, their national image will be substantially increased, right? And in this world, as I told you, in the world of social media and in the world of one world in real time, you cannot hide it. You cannot hide the injustice thing and fake thing, and which is not based on the facts. So this is a very fundamental issue that you have to think about in public diplomacy. And second thing is short-term versus long-term public diplomacy strategies. As I told you, in the middle, you have to tackle short-term crisis management, right? The perception and image could be quickly fixed in a very short period of time. And also, you have to focus on long-term public diplomacy program or project in a very steady way, progressive way, so that the people of other countries can understand our culture, policy, and also mindset, right, of our country and people. Third thing is how perception affects foreign policy, like brand and storytelling. As I told you, the perception of certain countries, people toward the other country, if it is very negative and very hostile, it's not easy for the other country's foreign policy, right, to be working in a proper way. So definitely, perception will affect foreign policy of country A toward country B. And what is the secret of Korean development? As I hinted briefly, I can say that Korea's economic miracle, as you see in the last several decades, is not simply based on hard working and very hard education. It is based on 5,000 years of our civilization and cultural heritage, right? And the people's mindset to respect education and to respect elder people, and to respect our tradition of respecting people first and something like that. And also like a visionary strategy to we don't want to leave this poverty to our next generation. I think this motivational aspect of people's movement in 60s, 70s, and 80s is quite important, in a secret of Korean development. Liberal democracy and market economy and open society. I think Korea can be very proudly, say that Korea enjoy those three elements. This will make any country in the world to say, openly that we are focusing on this area, rule of law, democratic institutions, and human rights will have a, quite a good position, right, in international setting in promoting the country, right? So I think this is related to universal values that I mentioned in like a UN Charter. But basically, even though you are providing good culture, good art, music, but I think this liberal democracy, market economy, and open society and open competition and freedom of expression, those are very important aspects. And culture versus policy, and emotional versus reasoning is important. As I told you, there are 4 areas, like first culture and caring, sharing, serving, right? And in the middle there are 2 areas, policy explanation and information and knowledge sharing. So first 2 culture and sharing is very emotional approach, right? Which touch upon their hearts and minds. On the other hand, those policy explanation and public relations and information sharing is very much focused on like reasoning, right? So first part is touching, involving your heart. The second part is touching upon your head, right? Reasoning and understanding, right? And in a convincing way. So if you combine those two areas, emotion first and heart moving first, right? Like, you like K-pop naturally, right? And also if you hear foreign policy agenda and orientation and position, if you can understand and you are convinced, you will support, right? And assist even, in that way. So those emotional and reasoning and understanding way is combined. So it will be very robust public diplomacy, right? Very solid. And another aspect is one-way versus two-way. As I told you, in traditional public diplomacy, after World War II, Cold War period until late 80s and early 90s, generally is one way of propaganda is the dominant way of so-called public diplomacy, even though at that time we don't use this word public diplomacy that much, but I think typically dominant way of handling this issue. But in two-way means that mutual, not unilateral, and also voluntary, not imposing. Voluntary, not imposing means that in giving a good image of Korea, right? And we don't want to make people coming to this Korean culture in a very imposing way. It's if you want, you can come. If you want, you can listen to. If you want, you can sing along. It's a dance together. It's up to you, right? It's quite a voluntary way. So I think this is very important principle, not imposing. If you like it, you can do that, right? If you don't have to follow it. And also inbound public diplomacy is quite interesting concept. The people who are living in Korea, like as a foreign citizens, like students are coming from foreign countries, the public diplomacy toward you, we call it inbound public diplomacy, right? We don't have to go outside, right? There are so many students are coming from different part of the world in Korea currently, and also Korean foreign workers, and intercultural marriage. There are so many people coming from different part of the world, Korea. What we are trying to do is we can give a positive image, right? But the uniqueness of this inbound public diplomacy is that we cannot hide, right? We cannot manipulate certain image, right? Because you are living every day, meeting with people, and you are experiencing with the real time on the spot, right? In the field of Korea and Korean people, and you are hearing voices from media, television, and the newspaper, and with friends. So maybe you might have a better understanding on Korea, right? And better image on Korea. So after you experience like even 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, after you finishing your study and when you go back to your home country, maybe many friends, you know, from your hometown or your school will ask about Korea through you, right? And when you are asked, well, what is Korea? You know, what was a good and negative point of Korea? When you tell your friend who you know have never come to Korea before, and your narrative and your storytelling and your explanation is very powerful, right? Because they think that you are living in Korea more than, you know, several months and sometimes several years. You have a very authoritative, you know, narrative on Korea, right? So, you know, it's difficult to control, but I think this is a very important area of public diplomacy. And what is the ultimate goal of public diplomacy? I think this question is also critical in public diplomacy. In generally, we, you know, foreign policy is quite simple, right? To project their influence in a maximum way, right? Sometimes with the coercive way, right? Sometimes with the negotiation means, sometimes with like a mutual cooperation. There are many different ways, but public diplomacy could be interpreted if you think a very simple way that, okay, we maximize our influence with cultural means, right? But I don't think that is the right proposition. The wording that I'm using, you know, good and benevolent influence, is that some, even though, you know, I don't like this influence wording, but anyhow, the mention, you know, voluntary, right, in second line. The influence means that we, with like a soft power or, you know, or policy explanation and Korea's development, you know, knowledge, people from outside can, you know, understand and can follow and you know, and be convinced and, you know, have support and would like to enjoy in a voluntary way, right? And our ultimate goal is to make this world more peaceful, right? And more just, more tolerant, and more secure, and more sustainable, right? And more inclusive. This is exactly what we want. We don't want raise, you know, the reputation of Korea. You know, we are better than you. This is not exactly what we want, right? We want enjoy and you know, be more prosperous, you know, together, and happy and peaceful. So this is exactly what joyful. This is exactly what we want, right? So there is no any interest in my view, right? And reputation is sort of could be, you know, interpreted in different way. I'm not sure you heard about the like 홍익인간. It's a 4 Chinese character. Literally, we are trying to give a benefit to all people around the world. So this is a meaning. It was traditionally inherited from our ancestors in like, you know, it's countless years, several, maybe thousand. You know, we have this kind of concept. We don't want to be, you know, selfish, and we don't want to focus on our national interest. We would like to give, you know, benefit to all over the world. Up until like 80s or 90s, we are struggling to, you know, manage ourselves, right? You know, in a good shape. But now we are ready to provide many assistance and, you know, benevolence around the world. So hope, vision, love, compassion, and empathy, caring, sharing, serving could be, in my view, eventual public diplomacy objective of Korea, right? We would like to give young people around the world a sense of hope, right? And sense of vision and sense of motivation that you can have better life, right? If you have good education and good worldview, right? And with self-esteem and self-respect, you can do that. So this is the message I'd like to carry. This is the final part. Let me introduce you the concept of global citizenship that I'm promoting very much in the United Nations for last several years. This was a concept which was introduced in education field in UNESCO, because traditionally, education is dealing with access, education for all, and also high quality education, right? As you in this program, university, in Korea University will provide one of the top level of high quality education, right? But in reality, if you think about like ISIS recruitment, efforts to make many young people as a foreign terrorist fighter, we heard that they are outreaching or trying to recruit, and also even recruited more than 40,000 people around the world from more than 100 countries. And many young people are victims, right? And easily entangled with this extreme narratives, right? And many of them have high education, diploma and degree, right? And this means that high quality education cannot guarantee the peace and security around the world, right? We are seeing a prevalent violent extremism around the world. So global citizenship will focus on new orientation of education to give positive worldview with focusing on like human dignity and human rights and universal values, right? As I told you in UN Charter. And on top of that, they understand global reality, why there are violent extremism, climate change, and refugees. And based on that, they will give education on mutual respect and understanding, tolerance, cultural diversity, and also compassion and empathy to help people in need. And eventually, they will focus on climate change and the planet and Mother Earth as our common destiny. So this is a global citizenship. I think public diplomacy can focus on this noble, approach in education as well as in society. This new concept to make every people responsible and sensible global citizens. So human dignity is always ultimate goal of this whole process. So I think Korea matters means that Korea is now in very pivotal position to have a bridging role and facilitating role and catalytic role to converge different views, different positions between developing countries and developed countries, right? In SDG, UN, currently we are doing that. And all that Korea means that we would like to provide our comprehensive and holistic image on Korea, not only just cultural K-pop thing, but overall our benevolent, foreign policy and our vision around the world to help people, as much as possible, right? And to provide good soft power, of course, K-pop is one of them. We would like to provide certain contents that with that, many young people can enjoy, right? And beloved Korea, Campaigns Korea, we don't want to be in just in silent, and very selfish way of handling this thing. We would like to project our influence and capability as much as possible around the world to help people in need. Currently, Korea is the second largest voluntary people, dispatching countries around the world, particularly focusing on Africa. After United States, Korea is the last, I think, almost 5,000-6,000 young people are currently working in small countries in Africa, Middle East, and South America, so that they can help people in need in that area. So this is, in my view, our ultimate goal as well as strategy. I'm not sure whether this strategy is the right expression even, but this is exactly what we are trying to do. Yes, this is the end of presentation. At this moment, you can, if you have some question or if you want to have some ideas and comments and any document information on this issue, you can email me. Now, I'd like to open the floor. I'd like to expect your comment, question, or your experience on Korea. It could be negative and positive. So in 10-15 minutes, I will try to hear your voices and have some interactive session. It could be K-pop, it could be any episode or issues related to public diplomacy as you hear this morning. Okay, raise your hand if you want. Maybe some students, yeah, please.
Regarding the Koreans' assets for public diplomacy, I've heard that Korean public diplomacy may be related to the low fertility rate of Korea or the aging of the society. So I'd like to know your thoughts about this.
Aging issue?
The aging issue and low fertility rate to the public diplomacy.
Korea is known, one of the lowest fertility rate in the world. We are actually facing aging issue very serious way. That is related to social reality and phenomena. It's not simply the low fertility issue, because we have to find out what is the reasons, what is the background that many young, newly, married couple will refrain from having their babies, right? But I think there are several, factors that affect those decisions or delayed decision. Because they are fearing about their economic situation, family economy, and high cost in having house, running the family, and at the same time they are fearing about education, right? So we have so much education cost as well as education, very limited education opportunity, right? Very tough, very competitive, as you imagine in Korea. And also having baby means that some hindrance of one of their parents, right, in continuing their career, right? So discontinuation and some pose of their career. So many young couple would like to continue their career as long as possible because getting the job is really difficult in Korea, right? In proper job. So if they move out like 1 or 2 years, maybe they are fearing that they could be sidelined or could be, it's difficult even re-entering that same position. So there are many, this I think is a social event. Your point is quite interesting and very important. That facts reflect a lot of social issues, and that will affect Korea's image, right? In the point of public diplomacy. So that is a tough job situation, and would like to continue their career, and also cost of living, housing, many things, and also in terms of advancing education, very tough. So this is very complex and complicated issue. But if you go in deep, that reveals, the reality of Korea society, right? So I hope that you can understand in a deeper way. There is no any single solution, in short-term period. We have to provide a lot of incentives for education, and having more children. You will give more, allowances, as we seen like France and other like Sweden. Maybe many advanced countries will have a similar experience. I think that is a issue that involved in many different dimensions, in public diplomacy. Very good question. Please, yeah.
So, okay. So my question is about visa in Korea. So in order to get visas in Korea, apart from student or, for example, a teaching visa, it's quite difficult to get one. And I was wondering if you could explain maybe some of the reasons as to why it's difficult, and if maybe Korea is thinking of making it easier in the future, because I haven't really met any workers in Korea apart from teachers in schools. So
that is also good question in my view. That is touching on Korean people's perception, right, on foreign workers or visitors or students or permanent residents. Traditionally, Korea is a very ethnically homogeneous group, right? Community with the same race, and language and history and tradition. But in 2 decades ago, we are opening our door to particularly foreign students and workers, because we need labor, right? And our local labor cost is enhanced quite substantially. And we have quite several 100,000 foreign workers on category, and students. I think there is no any strong limitation, but still we are reviewing many things, and also like recently refugee issue, also contending issue. So we are in like a transition period, like traditionally very homogeneous and to narrow down our community sense of community in the limited way, to our own people and Korean people. But now we are advancing, and we are adopting the so-called sense of humanitarian assistance and the peace building around the world, as I told you, we are engaging this sort of like emergency settlers coming from different world, including recently like Yemen, and Syrian refugees. Even though, according to our refugee law, it's not easy to give them a status of refugee, but we are giving them like emergency humanitarian stay. That is the status which will allow them to work. So I think it's not 100% same level as a refugee, but I think this will allow them to stay in Korea in a special category, and they can work and they can stay in Korea. And it could be initially 1 year, but it could be extended, without any limitation. So it is sort of like a quasi, resident status. So we are trying to do as much as possible. So we are in that kind of transition, right? From traditionally very, closed society. Now we are moving toward open society, right? There is a strong discussion on how we can open our doors to foreigners in not only in students, but many refugees and many things. But there is still fear from many conservative group that it could be like parasite of terrorism, and many like money laundering and trafficking, drug trafficking thing. So, but I think we are moving that direction to openness, right, and abiding by international standard on accepting, humanitarian refugees or displaced persons around the world. But we need a, process of consensus, of the people of Korea to moving toward this direction. Thank you. If not, let me conclude my lecture this morning. I hope that you can have better understanding on a very trendy foreign policy issue, public diplomacy. So let me simply conclude that one very famous phrase in UNESCO Constitution of UNESCO, in preamble part, there is one very famous paragraph that since wars begin in the minds and heart of men and women, in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men and women that defenses of peace should be constructed. So this is a very important thing, because mindset, people's mindset and perception and attitude will decide his or her action, right? In a sometimes negative way, in a positive way, right? It could be sometimes war, right? We see the 2 world wars, right? And then defenses of peace, right, should be started from the hearts and minds of the people. So this perception approach is, as I told you, it's quite, looks like very soft, but it's very serious, strong, and even sharp, right? Because this is dealing with the perception and attitude and mindset of certain people, right, toward the other country or other people. So I think this approach is critical and fundamentally important, right, to have a better understanding and to make this world, much safer and secure and peaceful and inclusive. Right? So I hope that you can understand this public diplomacy in a very serious way. If that is the case, I think you will have a better understanding on international politics, and you can grasp in a very more systematic way on what is going on around the world. So I hope that you can focus on public diplomacy in even in a more thorough and substantive way in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.